This is a Fox News alert. Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Bret Baier. We are covering three big stories tonight. A portion of Donald Trump's 2005 tax return went public last night. House Intelligence Committee leaders say there's no evidence that then candidate Trump was wiretapped. And the fight heats up over the Obamacare repeal and replace plan. I asked the top Senate Democrat about it today. We will have that interview for you in just a minute. But first, we have Fox team coverage. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel has a look at the tough sell on the GOP's health bill. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is following the battle between the president and Congress over wiretapping. But we begin with Chief White House Correspondent John Roberts on how the trumped-up story of the president's tax return took an interesting turn. Good evening, John.
A lot of interesting twists and turns tonight, Brett. First of all, a new Fox News poll finds the president's approval rating has slipped 5 points in the last month. It's down to 43% now from 48% back in February. But the president is getting some good news tonight from the curious leak of one of his tax returns. Even though the information appeared quite favorable to him, President Trump was today professing outrage over the leak of his 2005 tax return in an interview to air on Tucker Carlson tonight.
I have no idea where they got it, but it's illegal, and you're not supposed to have it, and it's not supposed to be leaked. And it's certainly not an embarrassing tax return at all, but it's an illegal thing. They've been doing it. They've done it before. And I think it's a disgrace.
The returns, confirmed as genuine by the White House, showed the president paid about $38 million in tax on $153 million in income. The president's effective tax rate was 25.3%, far more than the 18.7% President Obama paid in 2015 and the 13.5% that Bernie Sanders did in 2014. That prompted some snark today from Capitol Hill.
Since Senator Sanders is such a good socialist, I think he'd want to pay his fair share. I'm expecting news any day that he's going to send a couple $100,000 into the IRS so he can pay his fair share.
Democrats in Congress ignored the disparity, instead insisting that if the White House could confirm 1 year's tax return, it should release more. The source of the document became a hot topic of speculation today. The return was stamped client copy, which may have limited who had access to it. The White House also had its own copy on hand last night and had a statement ready before the return was shown on TV. But when television host Joe Scarborough suggested President Trump leaked his own tax return to distract attention from the healthcare fight in Russia, the president's attorney Michael Cohen viciously spat back on Twitter. As president's personal attorney, I know who has his taxes. You better have proof to back up your claim, and big mouth. Now, we don't know why the president paid such a huge amount of alternative minimum tax in the year 2005, but one accounting expert told Fox News it is possible for a developer to pay an enormous amount of alternative minimum tax in 1 year because of what's called the percentage completion rule, and then in subsequent years get most, if not all of that back in the form of an AMT tax credit. Brett?
John Roberts, live on the North Lawn. John, thank you. There is still no evidence that Trump Tower was wiretapped during the 2016 campaign. That is the word today from top lawmakers on the House Intelligence Committee. But as Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge reports, that's not the end of the investigation into Russia ties.
With agreement from FBI Director James Comey and NSA Director Admiral Mike Rogers to testify publicly on Capitol Hill Monday, the House Intelligence Committee leaders said they have seen nothing that backs up the president's March 4th allegations on Twitter.
To date, I've seen no evidence that supports the claim that President Trump made that his predecessor had wiretapped he and his associates at Trump Tower.
That evidence still remains the same, that we don't have any evidence that that took place.
But the president suggested he would be vindicated in an interview with Fox's Tucker Carlson.
Wiretap covers a lot of different things. I think you're going to find some very interesting items coming to the forefront over the next 2 weeks.
The committee's chairman and ranking member want more information about whether Trump team communications were picked up by the intelligence community as they tracked foreign targets. Incidental intelligence collection happens when a foreign target like the Russian ambassador is tracked, and in the process, the phone calls and text messages of an American citizen are picked up. Fox News is told that's how former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn's communications were captured. The congressman sent this letter to the CIA, FBI, and NSA leadership, asking them to confirm by Friday how many Americans were ensnared and whether strict privacy rules for protecting their identities were followed.
What I remain concerned about is whether or not there is additional incidental collection that we are not aware of, and then if any of that information was put into any types of intelligence reports, and then whether or not additional names were unmasked.
The Democrats want more information about Roger Stone, a political advisor associated with the Trump campaign, who confirmed and downplayed contact with Julian Assange, the head of WikiLeaks, as well as Guccifer 2.0, the hacking entity that spilled the damaging emails from the Democratic National Committee.
These two platforms were used to publish documents damaging to Secretary Clinton and helpful to Donald Trump. So I'll tell you, that concerns me a great deal.
Late today, two senior senators, Democrat Dianne Feinstein and Republican Chuck Grassley, whose committee has direct oversight for the FBI, met with Director Comey and offered nothing to reporters, citing the briefing's highly classified and sensitive nature. Brett.
Catherine, thank you. More on this with the panel. President Trump is on the road tonight, in part to make his case to the public that they need to repeal and replace Obamacare. Tonight, Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel looks at the hard sell facing Capitol Hill.
Vice President Mike Pence was back on Capitol Hill trying to promote the Republican health care proposal. He met with the Republican Study Committee, the most conservative group in the House, as GOP leaders look at fine-tuning the legislation.
We're working out some final details to make the bill even better, and there's some great conservative wins already in this bill.
Supporters of the plan point to the Wall Street Journal editorial page citing its fiscal bonus, calling it, quote, the best chance in a generation to control a runaway government. Yet some Republicans are still reluctant.
I want to make sure that the cost increases for seniors, as we've seen, are taken up. I think that's very problematic about it.
And some critics are not shy about expressing their complaints. Some outside groups are calling for a major overhaul of the plan. They are quick to blame Speaker Paul Ryan, but he points out it's not just his plan.
Obviously, the major components are staying intact because this is something we wrote with President Trump. This is something we wrote with the Senate committees.
The new Fox poll has approval of the president's handling of health care at 35%. And on issues voters want Mr. Trump to accomplish first, repeal and replace of Obamacare is at 7%. Ahead of the House Budget Committee taking up this GOP package, the panel's top Democrats said it's in trouble.
This piece of legislation, the American Health Care Act, is in legislative quicksand. It is sinking of its own weight, and every time the Republicans try to move one way or another, it is sinking faster.
South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham sounded the alarm as well.
It is mortally wounded. I don't know if it's died yet. This is the last best chance for Republicans to pass health care by themselves and screw it up.
Graham is among those suggesting if the president cannot get the right bill, he should let Obamacare collapse and then challenge Democrats to help him fix a problem they created. Brett?
Mike Emanuel live on the Hill. Mike, thank you. Earlier today, I sat down with the Senate's top Democrat, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, and we started by discussing the future of Obamacare.
Our Democrats are totally united, and what's interesting, the places that would feel the loss, the repeal of ACA the most, are sort of rural, red state areas. So when our senators from the redder states that Trump carried by 10 or 15 points go home, they're getting huge support for not repealing.
But you do say that fixing Obamacare is necessary.
Yeah.
And do you disagree that it would implode if it is just let to go?
Is CBO, just in their report, and CBO to us is very reliable. The head of CBO, as you know, was recommended number one by Tom Price, now the Secretary of HHS chosen by Donald Trump. He said it's not going to collapse. Look, our view has been very simple. Once President Trump and Speaker Ryan, Leader McConnell say they're no longer going to repeal, of course we want to make ACA better and we'll work with them to improve it. But if you repeal it, you can't do it. You have nothing. And they're having a great deal of trouble, quote, replacing it.
Right, but the markets for Obamacare show demand has leveled off, prices for premiums and deductibles are skyrocketing for a lot of people.
In some states, so some states go up, some states go down.
Other than throwing money at the system, how specifically would Democrats fix that?
Well, there are some ways, and there'd have to be compromises with the Republicans. We would give the state insurance commissioners more authority to limit the price increases.
So why not put out your plan to say, here's an alternative?
Because you can't do it if you're going to try to repeal it. Once you repeal it, what are we building on? You can't do it once you repeal it.
Candidate Trump ran on it. You have 11 Senate Democrats up for re-election in 2018 from states where 82% or more of the counties were won by candidate Donald Trump.
When they go home to those very counties, they are now hearing, don't repeal. Candidate Trump ran on repeal without showing what the replacement was. Here's what he said: it'll cost less and cover more people. That is clearly not the Ryan plan.
And so, just to clarify, you say that if Obamacare is left as it is, you do not believe that it will implode and that prices will continue to skyrocket.
I believe that's right. We would be certainly willing to work together to fix it.
Today, after the release last night of President Trump's 2005 tax returns, does that, in your mind, rebut some of the claims, including Secretary Clinton, that he paid no taxes?
The Trump campaign said these numbers are accurate. It's 2 pages of 1 year. The real nub of this is what happened over 10 years. There might have been a year that he was good, but much more importantly, where's he getting all this money from? The key question here is, are there Russian sources? And might those have affected or will affect President Trump? Everyone knows, contrary to Republican beliefs, has been much softer on Putin than traditionally Republican candidates, presidents, senators have been. And the question is why? Everyone should know. When he makes a deal with Russia, whatever it is, you don't want anyone suspecting it's done because he's got hotels there. Here's an example. There's 7 countries on that list. Saudi Arabia, which had more terrorists come into the U.S., including the ones, 15 of the 19, I think, who were involved in the World Trade Center. Saudi Arabia wasn't on the list. Now, there's speculation. I don't know if it's true or not. He didn't put Saudi on the list because he had hotels there.
What they say,
clean.
No, listen, Senator, they say that the visa checking in Saudi Arabia is adequate enough to deal with the visas that they have to bring in. And the 6 countries now
then why do more terrorists come in from Saudi than from these countries? So
are you saying that Saudi Arabia should be on the list?
What I am saying is every country ought to be vetted. I think they did a poor job of it in general, okay? So we should tighten up everywhere.
You use words when talking about the Trump administration and President Trump and Russia.
Yes.
You use words collusion and coordination, but what you really mean is conspiracy and aiding and abetting, both of which are crimes. So are you alleging President Trump or his campaign committed a crime?
What I am saying is not that there was a conspiracy. There are enough questionable acts, we saw what happened with Flynn, to have a full and thorough and impartial investigation. Putin, in my opinion, is an evil man. He's a bully. And if there's a potential that there was collusion, people should know about it. I'm not saying there is. I'm saying there ought to be an investigation. The Justice Department should appoint a special prosecutor. The special prosecutor could look into things independently, and you could have the investigation go quietly and alongside.
But you want to get something done.
Absolutely.
With this administration.
Here's what I've said. I said 2 things to President Trump. First, I said, you ran as a populist against both the Democratic and Republican establishments, as a change agent. But you seem to be governing from the hard right. Most of the appointments are hard right.
You voted against Elaine Chao.
Okay, that's true.
Why would you do that?
Because I said, I am for a big infrastructure bill, but you have to do it with real spending, not tax breaks. And Elaine Chao did not commit to that.
So you're talking, Senator, about policy.
Yeah.
And when you get to the infrastructure policy, you can argue all day about that. But when people are nominated to positions and all of your colleagues don't have any problem with Elaine Chao, why do you vote against her?
I told you why.
I know, because you're arguing policy. You've talked numerous times about this White House, saying, and many Democrats have, calling it chaos.
I have.
But by slow walking the confirmation for these cabinet officers, who you know could be approved at the end easily, isn't that dragging it out? And isn't that contributing to whatever chaos?
These cabinet nominees, every cabinet nominee deserves a full vetting. That's our responsibility. Advise and consent. It doesn't mean rubber stamp. Mitch McConnell wanted them all approved on the first day. But there are 3. This cabinet is a little different than others. 1, Lots of them had huge financial entanglements. The president said he was going to clean the swamp. Well, the cabinet is filled with billionaires, Wall Street people. And third, so many of the cabinet people had different ideas than what the president campaigned on. What are their views?
Don't you think you've hindered President Trump to get his whole cabinet operational?
First of all, President Trump...
In comparison to President Obama and how Senator McConnell and the Republicans dealt with that?
President Obama was far better prepared.
My point is, Elaine Chao didn't have
Mattis, even though I didn't vote for her.
Well, yes, you didn't, and we noted that. What do you think you can get done? What do you think you can negotiate with this president and get across the finish line?
I'll give you one quick, easy example. He called for the elimination of the carried interest loophole, right, where these Wall Street guys pay less taxes than their secretaries, many of them. If he put that on the floor, we'd do it in a minute. Infrastructure, I mentioned. If it's real money and can build real new roads, we'd work with the president on it. We would. And here's another one, trade. My views on trade, I voted against NAFTA back in 1994, even though President Clinton asked me to vote for it, are closer to Trump's than they are to Obama's or Bush's. I'd be willing to work with them on trade, so would the majority of our caucus. They haven't sent us anything on infrastructure. We put out a plan. We've gotten nothing back. He started out on ACA. He knew that would create partisan divisions. If he goes to a huge tax break, 95% of which will go to wealthy people, almost all Democrats are going to oppose him. But there are other things we could work with him.
What about border funding? You voted for the border wall.
Yeah. No,
for
I
funding,
didn't vote for the border wall.
Border security.
I voted for... And
they're going to now come forward with security funding, and there's going to be a request, possibly tomorrow.
Okay, let's see. A bipartisan bill got the support of a lot of Republicans, called the Schumer-McCain bill. We had much better protection on the wall, on the border, than a wall would be. They haven't submitted it yet. The major basis of it is a wall.
But you're not, you're not ruling out funding
expert,
request on the border.
No. If Donald Trump would look at the bill that Senator McCain and I passed, he might agree with 98% of it. He should look at it.
Let me ask about your party. Senator Bernie Sanders in New York Times Magazine on the future of the Democratic Party was asked what the party currently stands for. Here's what he said, quote, "You're asking a good question, and I can't give you a definitive answer. Certainly there are some people in the Democratic Party who want to maintain the status quo. They would rather go down with the Titanic so long as they have first-class seats." Here is a guy who won 24 states in the presidential election. He is now a member of your Democratic Senate leadership.
I put him on.
And he can't say what your party stands for.
Well, I don't know when that quote came about.
It's just now. It's
Bernie
just
and we are working together. He supported our infrastructure bill. He was one of the sponsors of it. Yesterday, we put in a bill for family leave, real good paid family leave. This is part of our Democratic proposals. He's on it. On trade, Bernie and I are working. We stand for a strong economic message aimed at helping the middle class and those trying to get there. We believe that Donald Trump, who campaigned like that, is actually acting as a president for the very wealthy and the special interests. They're doing it on most of their proposals. In 2016, we did not have a sharp, strong economic message aimed at the middle class. We will now.
There is a question inside your caucus about which way it goes.
You bet.
Does it go towards
question.
Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren? Does it go more centrist? It seems like it's going that way.
We will, on economic issues, a strong, bold economic plan. We will have Bernie Sanders on board. We will be united on a strong economic message. That is the #1 reason we lost in 2016. We didn't have it. I blame myself and everybody else.
Does Neil Gorsuch get in?
I have some real doubts about Gorsuch. Again, I think he has been a judge who favored the wealthy economic interests over the middle class.
Are you still going to push to stop Neil Gorsuch?
Not a single Democrat has come out for him. Most have not come out against him. I think people are waiting for the hearing.
And so are you worried that the nuclear option is going to be used?
I hope not. Listen, we did not adopt the nuclear op. Harry Reid, when he changed the rules, did not do the Supreme Court at my suggestion. I said it's such an important position. I said cabinet too, but he didn't listen to me on that. But it's such an important position that you should get 60 votes whether a Democrat or Republican is in.
You've known Donald Trump for a long time.
Not well, but I've known him.
Yeah, you even recalled how he helped Democrats. So despite the politics and the political evolution, Do you observe any differences between the man you knew and the man who is now president that you interact with today?
Yeah, I will tell you this. A lot of his personality traits are the same, whether you like him or not. But as a president and president-elect, he's moved much further to the right than how he campaigned.
Can you negotiate with him?
Certainly, if he recognizes that our values are here. And negotiating doesn't mean we're going to do the switch that he did and move all the way over there.
Senator Schumer, we appreciate the time.
Thank you. Great to be with you, Brett.
We asked folks in our Fox News poll their opinion of the Senate Minority Leader. The surprising number in these results, take a look at Democrats. 31% of Democrats say they've never heard of Senator Schumer. We'll have more of those exchanges with the panel. 2 Russian government officials are among 4 people charged today in a massive hack on Yahoo, in a case that's the first of its kind against the Kremlin. Correspondent Doug McKelway joins us live from the Justice Department with details. Good evening, Doug.
Evening, Brett. This marks the first time that the United States government has filed cyber criminal charges against Russian government officials, and it all stems from that 2014 attack on Yahoo, which may have compromised as many as 500 million accounts. Named in the indictment are Dmitry Dukachev, 33, Igor Sushin, 43, Alexei Belan, 29, and Karim Baratov, 22, not seen here. Most troubling, Dukachev and Sushin were employed by the Russian spy agency, the FSB, where they were assigned to a special unit that worked cooperatively with the FBI to combat international cyber crimes. One U.S. official called that deceit beyond the pale, which calls for a reassessment of U.S.-Russian cooperation against cyber crime.
It's something we're going to continue to work at, and I think this case is going to be a great test of that.
And U.S. authorities are confident that the Russian government under Putin fully backed this scheme.
We have reason to believe, based on our evidence, they were acting in their capacity as FSB officials.
FSB agents Dukachev and Sushin tried to cast as wide a net as possible, using the 500 million Yahoo accounts to search for Americans who served perhaps in the military or diplomatic corps, and then launching spear phishing and fake cookie attacks to seek access to their .mil or .gov accounts. Meanwhile, the alleged hacker Belan apparently just wanted money. One scheme of his, he would direct Yahoo search results for erectile dysfunction drugs to his phony site, earning cash with each click. And lastly, Brett, the suspect Baratov, who resides in Canada, was arrested yesterday by Canadian authorities and will likely be extradited. As for the 3 other Russian nationals, their criminal fate remains somewhat in doubt right now because the U.S. does not have an extradition treaty with Russia. Right back to you.
Doug McKelway, live outside the Justice Department. Doug, thank you. Interest rates are going up. The Federal Reserve raised rates a quarter point and signaled that any further hikes this year will be gradual. This is the second time in 3 months the Fed has raised rates. The markets like the move by the Fed today. The Dow was up 113. The S&P 500 was up 20. The Nasdaq grew by 43. President Trump plans a review of fuel efficiency regulations set out by the Obama administration in the final days of his presidency. The news was welcomed by automakers who met with the president in Motor City today, but several states could drive a wedge into any plan to relax standards. Chief Correspondent Jonathan Hunt takes a look at the fight over fuel efficiency.
Just a week before President Obama left office, the Environmental Protection Agency announced it had finished a review of fuel emission standards, thus locking in tougher rules. The review was not scheduled to be wrapped up before 2018. The new rules called for the auto industry to achieve a fleet average fuel economy of 54.5 miles per gallon by 2025, nearly doubling the 2010 standard, a move President Trump today dismissed as a rush to judgment.
We are going to ensure that any regulations we have protect and defend your jobs, your factories are going to be fair.
Automakers praised the president's decision to return to the original review timetable, saying the Obama standards could increase costs and depress the industry.
Let's make sure we do it in a way that is responsive to consumers' needs and wants and at prices that they can afford, and that the American men and women who are building these cars and trucks are building cars and trucks that Americans want to buy.
Environmentalists accuse the automakers of crying wolf.
Detroit told us once upon a time that it would go out of business putting seatbelts in our cars. Didn't happen. They told us they would go out of business putting catalytic converters in our cars, putting airbags in our cars. None of that happened.
And environmentalists fear that alongside relaxing emission standards, the Trump administration might also move to strike down the waiver California was granted under the 1963 Clean Air Act to set its own rules for car makers. 12 other states have followed California's lead in setting separate standards, so a court battle seems inevitable if the president does revoke the waiver, with California already bringing on board former Attorney General Eric Holder to lead that fight. Brett?
Jonathan, thank you.
I have no idea where they got it, but it's illegal, and you're not supposed to have it, and it's not supposed to be leaked. And it's certainly not an embarrassing tax return at all, but it's an illegal thing. They've been doing it. They've done it before, and I think it's a disgrace.
After the release last night of President Trump's 2005 tax returns, does that, in your mind, rebut some of the claims, including Secretary Clinton, that he paid no taxes?
The Trump campaign said these numbers are accurate. It's 2 pages of 1 year. The real nub of this is what happened over 10 years. There might have been a year that he was good, but much more importantly, where's he getting all this money from? The key question here is, are there Russian sources? He's president. To me, it is selfish not to make public all your tax returns. Every other president, Democrat and Republican, has done.
Well, President Trump and the minority leader in the Senate talking about the release of these 2005 tax returns. A tweet this morning from the president: does anybody really believe that a reporter who nobody ever heard of went to his mailbox and found my tax returns? NBC News. Fake news. The tax rate comparisons, put this up earlier in the day, but the average income average there. Let's bring in our panel. Steve Hayes, editor-in-chief of the Weekly Standard. Mara Liasson, national political correspondent of National Public Radio. Michael Needham is chief executive officer at Heritage Action for America, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Mara, what about this?
Well, this was a leak that was pretty good for Donald Trump. There was nothing in these tax returns that suggested he was a tax cheat or avoided taxes. He might have taken a big write-off. So I don't think this was a bad thing for him. And as you just showed, he paid a pretty healthy percentage of taxes compared to other people. Where David K. Johnston, who happened to have won a Pulitzer Prize for covering this kind of stuff, got it, we don't know. But I don't think that Donald Trump was that upset about this leak compared to other ones.
Steve?
No, I agree. And the answer, I mean, the question you asked Chuck Schumer, does this contradict the claims from Hillary Clinton? The answer to that is short. Sure. And it's no, of course it does. But he has to make up, all sorts of additional charges. I mean, it is ironic
so much
to me.
Time. There's only so much time for an interview.
No, I mean, he answered. You asked the question.
No, I know, but
he could have given the answer.
All these people
course
are
it
tweeting,
contradicts.
like, why didn't you get this?
No, of course. No, it was the right question to ask. He just didn't answer it honestly. And then he went on to speculate. I mean, this was so ironic to me. This guy who spends a lot of his time criticizing Donald Trump for making things up or speculating irresponsibly, and a lot of that criticism I think is valid. Here you have Chuck Schumer saying, well, in the tax returns, it could indicate that he has money from the Russians, maybe from Saudi Arabia, maybe that's why he didn't include them on the list. This is just rank speculation of the kind that we got used to from Harry Reid. It's irresponsible. He shouldn't be engaging in it. If you want to make an argument that Donald Trump should release his tax returns, I would agree with that argument. I think he ought to, but don't go on and do the kind of thing that you spend much of your day criticizing Donald Trump for doing.
To that point, I thought that exchange about Saudi Arabia was very strange. I mean, Michael, the travel ban, he brings up Saudi Arabia, and maybe he chose not to put Saudi Arabia on the list because he has hotels there. Well,
yeah, I mean, it's just baseless speculation. It was based on legislation that passed, that Barack Obama signed, how those countries were chosen. But this whole story is also part of the reason the American people are so sick of Washington, D.C. and the way it's covered. I mean, look, we had an election. Hillary Clinton tried to make a big deal out of this, and the American people decided that they didn't care. And now this morning, ABC News spends 10 minutes on their morning show going through the big story of what was in Donald Trump's tax return when there's really no news. There's some good news from Donald Trump. It's not huge good news. It's not big bad news. Let's talk about the real issues.
Charles?
Well, it's good news because it's the first time the issue has come up. We've gotten a look at a real return, and it was not only a clean one, but a favorable one. In fact, I mean, it would feed speculation that perhaps it originated with Trump. I have no idea. But if it did, it would be a good idea on their part to have done it. Look, I think the Schumer response was an example of the sort of innuendo festival that we are now experiencing. The Saudi stuff was simply outrageous, and he kept it off the list because he has hotels there. Come on, everybody knows who was on the list and why. And it's just a way to throw the kitchen sink at Trump. Look, there's a lot of stuff on Trump, but this is not part of it. And the more you try to desperately throw everything at him, the more you discredit stuff that can actually be a valid criticism.
Okay, let's turn to the wiretapping claims. This is the House Intelligence Committee chairman and ranking member, and also Senator Graham and the president.
President Obama doesn't do wiretapping, just like President Trump can't do wiretapping. So the whole premise of the statement was wrong.
You can't level an accusation of that type without either retracting it or explaining just why it was done.
Now I want to know, was there any surveillance at all, with a warrant or without a warrant? The longer it takes to answer that question, the more suspicious I get.
But wiretap covers a lot of different things. I think you're going to find some very interesting items coming to the forefront over the next 2 weeks.
That is President Trump in the interview with Tucker Carlson that airs tonight. What the House Intel chair and ranking member said is that we haven't found anything that backs that up as of today.
Yep, as of today, and we'll be getting some more information as FBI Director Comey briefs various members of Congress. You know, Donald Trump said that President Obama wiretapped him. He didn't say that President Obama put on overalls and came with a little bag of tools. What he clearly was saying was that President Obama ordered him to be wiretapped either with or without a FISA warrant, and that's what we're going to find out about.
Steve.
Yeah, well, very clearly what President Trump accused President Obama of was incorrect, was false. And I think we knew that at the time. It was certainly clear, I think, to White House officials pretty early that President Trump was engaging in the kind of rank speculation that Chuck Schumer was engaging in your interview. Having said that, I think there's a lot more to learn about what the Obama administration was up to with respect to its targeting, if there was targeting, of the Trump administration, the Trump transition, or the Trump campaign. Did the Obama administration ease rules that would have made it easier to disseminate incidental collection that could have led to the unmasking of somebody like Mike Flynn? There's New York Times reporting, March 1st article that suggests that they might have done just that. There's more here, but it's important if you're the President of the United States and the leader of the free world to say things that are accurate.
Yeah, and when I ask a question to the Speaker of the House about reports, and he gives an answer that is kind of strange, and we follow up on it, it's interesting to be mentioned as one of the places that he saw reports, some asking about reports. So, Michael, the bottom line is, where does this go? What doesn't get talked about is the possible investigations into Paul Manafort and the former campaign manager. We knew that they were looking at him and connections to Russia and possibly money situation.
Yeah, I think those questions will be asked, and we need to wait and we need to get the answers and not rush to a judgment. At the same time, I think, and this was something else that Chairman Nunes and Adam Schiff brought up today, if in fact there are people in our intelligence community who leaked information about the National Security Advisor and his conversations with the Russian ambassador, and they were doing that just because they didn't like the new boss, or just because they wanted that information out there, that's also concerning. And so I think we need to take a pause on this. We need to wait till the 20th, the 28th, when there's open hearings. We need these investigations to end and realize there's a whole lot of baseless speculation. There's a whole lot of actual, very concerning accusations being put out, and let's see where they go.
Okay, this is a Fox News alert. We have, let's see, 5, 5 hours before the travel ban. The next one is to go into effect, and a federal judge in Hawaii has now ruled a temporary restraining order preventing this travel ban, the second one, the adjusted one, from going into effect, citing the merits of the Establishment Clause claim. The plaintiffs have met their burden establishing a strong likelihood of success, saying that they are going to put this on pause. Remember, these are the 6 countries we talked about in that interview with the minority leader. He wanted 7, it seemed, Saudi Arabia, but there are 6. And a second bite at the apple here to try to redo it by the administration after challenges in courts the first time. Charles, what does this mean, and what do you think happens?
This has become a sideshow. This is not going to affect anything. Had we had the first ban, it wouldn't have had any effect anyway. It's a temporary one. It suspends the immigration from these countries. The reason was supposed to be because there are hordes of them waiting to come in, and while we're tightening up the vetting, we have to block them. Everybody understands that was a farce because the order was blocked. So we've had, a month of this? The hordes have not come in. Throats have not been slit all over America. This is unnecessary. You never had to have the ban in the first place. The issue here is the vetting. Why not tighten the vetting with or without a ban and do it? That's supposed to be the heart of the issue. So I was sure there was going to be some kind of intervention. There is. This is going to put it on hold. I think that this issue is going to fade away because it has no impact. It was a response to a campaign, a promise, and will have no impact in the long run.
Mar.
But you know what's interesting about that order is they talked about the Establishment Clause. That's about whether this is a Muslim ban or not. What I understand is the administration is pretty confident that it's fixed the due process problems with the first Muslim ban, and the outstanding issue that the courts
Although they didn't call it a Muslim ban back then either.
I'm sorry, they didn't call it a Muslim ban, but I mean they fixed. There were several problems with it, but they think they fixed the due process problems. But it's the question of whether it is a religious test. That's what the courts are going to still adjudicate.
It was interesting to hear the member of the Saudi royal family yesterday saying, listen, we are confident that it is not a Muslim ban, number one. Number two, Saudi Arabia is very aggressive in its vetting who comes in its country, and we understand that. Steve.
Yeah, it's a pretty good spin. It's exactly the kind of spin that you'd expect from a senior Saudi official whose country is not on the list. Look, I think we're likely to see this go back and forth. I mean, I think this is likely to end up playing out in the courts as much as and in the populace as much.
But they
as
fight
it anywhere. Yeah, I think this fight is far from over.
Michael, you agree?
Yeah, no, I think it keeps going, and it's important for it to go on. The President of the United States, both through the Constitution, has the right to conduct our foreign affairs. Statutorily, the Congress has given him the right to set these policies. To have these judges coming in and making these rules is absolutely not the role of the judiciary. The person who has the information, the person who has the power, both by the Constitution and statute, to make this is the President of the United States. The judges need to stay out of it.
You know what's so striking about, just back to that Chuck Schumer back and forth on Saudi Arabia, was the stark difference between the Chuck Schumer we saw after the first travel ban, who was very emotional about not letting people into the country, and the Chuck Schumer we saw tonight who said, you know what, Saudi should be on that ban list.
Well, I mean, this is a festival of hypocrisy all around on all of these issues. You play the hand that embarrasses the other side. I agree that the judicial issue is an important one. This is a way overstep on the part of the judiciary. But as to national security, completely unimportant. It's a sideshow.
Really quickly, just the moral of the story is that Democrats shouldn't do the kinds of things that they complained about for the last 8 years.
Here's a great thing. We have Special Report online tonight. Thanks for inviting us into your home tonight. That's it for this Special Report. Fair, balanced, and unafraid. First 100 Days, hosted by Martha McCallum, starts right now. Special Report online, as promised, begins in seconds. A little abbreviated tonight, but we're going to get to the big issues in just about 15 seconds. Stay with us.